We haven't really talked about Hunter Brown. We saw him again over the weekend. Look, Hunter Brown has taken a major step forward this season. Spencer Arrighetti has also shown himself to be a legit big league pitcher. Maybe not as consistent as the Astros would like, but for a back of the rotation guy, been very, very serviceable. On the offensive side, Yainer Diaz has quietly become one of the best young hitters in the league, especially at the catcher position. So I think it's a good opportunity to kind of take a step back from the game to game analysis and kind of look at this team from the big picture perspective. How does this impact your opinion on the Astros and their championship window?
Yeah, sort of the octopus that gets limbs cut off, but they just regenerate and they're still around. You look to 2025 in a division where no team is great or close to great. The Mariners teeming with prospects better than what the Astros have by all the ranking systems, right? Jacob Melton just eked into the top 100 as number 100, and he did not perform well at AAA after having done okay at AA this year. And the Mariners have 6 guys in the top 100. Well, I'll bet anyone who wants a piece of the action, they're not all going to work out, and they're not all going to become stars, and the Mariners are just going to become a dynasty for a 6 to 8 year period in the American League West. So the Astros' geography helps them. And the vastly overrated saying 90% of the game is pitching, it's not close. But if it's 50%, that's a whole lot. And, going into next season, if the Astros had crashed and burned, and I guess we shouldn't remove the possibility of it, if they were to crash and burn and wind up missing the playoffs completely, how would that recalibrate what Jim Crane wants to do with the offseason in terms of mid and longer term planning and payroll construction for next season? But, this is a playoff team. You come back next year, you have Framber Valdez going into his contract year. You have Hunter Brown. You have Arrighetti. You have Ronel Blanco. And then you figure it out, right? Christian Javier along the way mid-year. Luis Garcia, you figure, should be able to work come spring training. McCullers, I consider done. If he comes back, hey, there's another bonus. Do you re-sign Kikuchi or Verlander, subject to the marketplace? They're going to go to spring training with pretty much all the bets covered in terms of volume arms to have themselves a real solid rotation, competitive rotation. And then in the bullpen, the contract is bloated and too long, but having Josh Hader back as your closer with Abreu, Tanner Scott pitching for peanuts. If Neris finishes well, does he come back on a 1-year contract? They're very well positioned, especially being in the American League West.
Yeah, and when we look at who will be here next year, what they've been doing lately over their last 5 starts, Arrighetti, 2.93 ERA, Framber, 2.73, Kikuchi, 2.89. We don't know if he'll be back, but nice to know he's pitching well. Hunter Brown, 2.7 ERA. The only outlier is really Ronel Blanco lately. His ERA is a tick above 4 at 4.34 over his last 4 starts. So he hasn't been quite as good as he was earlier in the season, but I think we expect a little bit of that regression from him. When I look towards next year, I think you should pencil Luis Garcia in there. If he should be ready to go. If they were thinking maybe he could do something this year, and now they're pushing him all the way to March of next year, hopefully he's ready to go. For me, though, with McCullers not doing anything this year, I know, make all your McCullers jokes, but also Garcia not doing anything this year. Remember when Justin Verlander had his Tommy John surgery? He didn't pitch the entire following next season either. So I'm not very confident that we're going to see Christian Javier next season. So I think you're going to need Luis Garcia to be that 5th starter for you. And he's a big dude. Hopefully he can push through this and he'll go on to have a really nice rest of his career after this injury. So that's kind of what I'm looking at for next year. And yeah, I'd love to have Verlander back or Kikuchi, but we'll see what their agents say, how much they want, and that'll be a big part of it.
Yeah, you don't go to spring training counting on Garcia as the 5th. You hope that he ramps up somewhere into the season and earlier better. There's also the qualitative question, right? It's not like Luis Garcia was a front of the rotation guy, which is on the one hand good that you don't have too much of your wagon hitched to his horse. On the other hand, for him to be a legit contributor, if he's a solid number 5 starter, that's just fine. but you don't count on him, and then you have an injury or he doesn't pitch well or has a setback, and then you're in the depth problems that the Astros faced earlier this season. Blanco's a burly guy. I think the workload factor and maybe the league catching up to him as a secondary factor are in play, but I think Blanco's also pretty legit. JP France was kind of lucky and pitched over his head relative to everything he'd ever done in the minor leagues. I don't think you count on JP France as being a factor in the Astros rotation. Ditto Jose Urquidy. So, I think you're going to re-sign or should be looking to re-sign one of your guys or a suitable replacement veteran innings eater guy. So you have at least 6-7 guys going to the spring that, all right, they're all ready to answer the bell opening day, and you can absorb the injury or two or thing that you were unreasonably asked to plan for before it happens. And, it happened. But overall, position of strength.
It's funny, too, when you look back, when we're talking about projecting championship windows and things like that. If you look back just a couple of years ago, the Chicago White Sox were looked at as a team on the come in the AL. And all the talking heads were saying like, oh, this is a young team under team control and they're set up for success in the future. They just need to put a few pieces around them. That clearly has not worked out for Chicago. And then just as recently as the beginning of this season, first couple of months in, it looked like Houston's championship window was open or was closed. And now it's a little bit more favorable. Obviously, there's moves to be made. Charlie, you hit on a lot of them, but you've got Bregman's deal coming up. Obviously, Verlander's deal, he's not going to vest, so his deal will be up. And then we've already hit on all the offensive challenges that you have in the outfield. Where do you see Dana Brown prioritizing filling some of these holes in this roster in the offseason?
Unless Jim Crane has a personal epiphany or just decides, you know what? My heirs are still going to be fine. The hell with it. I can't take it all with me, and I don't need to leave it all to them. And we're not worried about the tax. We're not worried about the repeater tax and the increased penalty that comes with it. If that does not occur, the Astros, Dana Brown, they're going to be shopping in the bargain bin. Right? Their payroll with the dead money we've talked about before, $19.5 million Abreu, $11.5 million Montero, $17 million McCullers, $12.8 million, at least a big chunk of it, if not all of it, Javier. That's over $60 million. That's a quarter of the way to the first competitive balance tax threshold with guys who may not give you one inning, one inning. So, re-signing Alex Bregman blows them past that first tax threshold without, filling multiple other spots. I guess the Anthony Santander parlor game has started. Well, he's not going to come to Houston for a discount, right? If he's going to stay with the discount, it would be in Baltimore, where he's thrived and they have a phenomenal young roster and without question are set up to be really good for the next several years. So the way the Astros would have to get Anthony Santander is paying top of market. Are they going to go 5 years, $140 million on a first baseman when they're paying $19.5 million dead dollars to Abreu next year? Remember, McCullers, they pay for next year and 2026, $17 million. So unless Jim Crane says, you know what, we are going to be the Dodgers, the Yankees, the Mets in terms of our payroll. I don't care if we're $60 million above that CBT to max out what we can in this era. Dana Brown's going to have serious limitations on what he's able to go after on the free agent market.
Yeah, I just think if they end up bringing back Bregman, that means they're not going to do much otherwise, I don't think. I just don't think they're going to spend that amount of money, bring back Bregman and pay for somebody else. So where they allocate that, Brandon, you're kind of asking. I think pitching, just because look what Dana Brown went through this year with how many guys got hurt and how they were sent scrambling at the trade deadline and hoping that Verlander comes back at 41 years old and giving you something you need. So I think maybe that spooked him a little bit, like, hey, we need to be kind of careful here. We need to make sure we have pitchers. And you can find back of the rotation guys that aren't super expensive, especially in the offseason. So I think that's probably where they go. I mean, even though it is a strength on a strength, pitching seems to be their strength now, but you're hoping you get a good Kyle Tucker back, and you're hoping Jordan stays healthy. And, Yainer Diaz is arguably, your best hitter. I mean, it's incredible how fast he's come along right now. I know most people would say Jordan, but Yainer's starting to make his case. Look how he is elevating his game so quickly. So you got to like what you see there. But yeah, I don't see Jim Crane throwing Yankees or Dodgers money at the budget. It's never really been something he's done before, and I don't expect him to start doing it this offseason.
And as we touched upon, I believe last week, right, Caratini's on the roster next season, and that's probably it. Walker Yannick off to a nice start in the minor leagues. If he's the truth, he arrives in 2026. Right, this is a veteran college player, not someone you drafted out of high school. And if he's a catcher, well, then Yainer becomes your regular first baseman as soon as some point in the 2026 season. So why in the hell would you go sink huge multi-year free agent dollars into a first baseman DH type this offseason, right? You need to look beyond what's just in front of your face if you're an Astros fan. You know, live in the moment. Tomorrow isn't promised. It's not, but it's probable. Right? And the Astros have plenty of tomorrows ahead that are going to factor into their budgeting decisions. And on Yainer, just to throw this in, right, his value is that much greater producing the way he does offensively as a catcher. First base, for whatever reason, it's actually been in some decline in terms of overall offensive output, but just over the history of the game, first base is an offensive position, right? Yordan is incredible. But if Yordan, and if he was a catcher, he'd be an absolute god. Yainer from June 1st forward, hitting over 340. When the Royals are in this weekend, very surprising playoff contender for a bunch of reasons, starting with Bobby Witt. If he finishes the way he's played to this point in the season, this 24-year-old guy is having one of the 10 greatest seasons any shortstop has ever had. And on his long list of, look at me, I'm freaking awesome, 11 years, $288 million, I cut the Royals a huge break with that. Bobby Witt Jr.'s start of the week, 400 this season with runners in scoring position. Right, leads Major League Baseball in hitting overall, 347 starting the week. 400 with runners in scoring position. Second in Major League Baseball with runners in scoring position this season, Royals first baseman Vinny Pasquantino. Fifth in all Major League Baseball this season with runners in scoring position, the Royals Salvador Perez. 3 of the top 5 guys in the game with runners in scoring position, Royals. That's how you be a surprise team, along with a starting rotation at every guy the Astros see in this 4-game series this coming weekend. All of them is Royals. ERAs mid-3 or lower. So I mentioned those 3 Royals in the top 5. After the top 2, third in all Major League Baseball starting this week, runners in scoring position, Yainer Diaz at 349. He's just been an absolute beast, a future MVP candidate performing at this level, if doing so as a catcher.
And you think it seemed like Dana underestimated his needs at starter this offseason? Obviously, he could not have foreseen the bevy of injuries that have befallen the pitching staff. So you wonder how much that informs his decision-making this offseason. As far as splurging on players, we saw Crane scratch that $95 million check for Hader. So I don't think any of us saw that coming. And I also wonder how this team finishes down the stretch and possibly into the postseason, how much that influences the decision-making. I'll give you guys the final word.
Yeah, I want to defend Dana Brown. It was an extraordinary rash of injuries that hit the Astros. And obviously, in an Astros-centric world, that's where the focus is. But, they can take a number. Go look at the Orioles pitching injuries, the Dodgers pitching injuries, the Rays pitching injuries. It's not like the Astros are a unique 4-leaf clover that no one else has been in the same boat. But hey, if that's the boat, you need to paddle away. But going to spring training, right? The Astros had Verlander and Valdez and a healthy Javier and Garcia. And you had Urquidy coming back, and you had JP France at that point healthy, and you had Hunter Brown. I mean, they had 7-8 guys in their mix. So, say that they should have gone out and added one more veteran starter when the budget was already stretched. And then when they lost guys, they overreacted with the level of commitment to Josh Hader for a guy who's only going to give you 70 innings on the upside as opposed to a starter. But I don't think Dana Brown nodded off in addressing starting pitching in the offseason. Just unusual circumstances evolved.
Yeah. Going into camp, I completely agree, Charlie. I think it was when you saw, Verlander is going to be delayed to start the season. He's dealing with an issue. And we know, and he had experienced that the season before with the Mets. And then JP France, remember, he had some shoulder issues in spring training, and it was a surprise to us that he made his first start of the season with JP France, because we were like, oh, wow, he's having some kind of issue, but he's already back. And then we know Urquidy had his share of arm injuries over the last few years. So there were some telltale signs, like, and that was when people were throwing out Lorenzen and some other guys. It's just some insurance after you're already seeing some of your guys dealing with injuries. But to your point, Charlie, a lot of pitchers deal with some arm discomfort as they're getting into spring training and getting back into the swing of things. So that's really not that unusual. It's just when you saw the ripple effect of everything that happened after that, with Javier and Urquidy going down for the year and JP France going down for the year, it really took off and made some people second guess him. But to be fair to Dana, do you want to sign with the Astros if it looks like you're like their 7th or 8th starting pitcher, going into a season? If you think you're a guy that should be a regular rotation piece, you don't want to maybe sign just as insurance for somebody. You want to go out there and play. So it works both ways. Guys have to want to come pitch for you too.
Look at the Texas Rangers within the American League West. All their pitching injuries, also their lineup collapsed. Right, these teams tied for the division last year. Astros won on a tiebreaker. Obviously, the Rangers then beat them in the ALCS and went on to win the World Series. But, they're pretty much equals last season. They both won 90 games. They played a 7-game ALCS. And the Astros, through enough star performance, ingenuity, surprise player development, bubblegum and baling wire, whatever, look where the 2022 World Series champions are presently versus where the 2023 World Series champions are presently.
Well said. We'll leave it there. That's it for this episode of Stone Cold Stros. If you listen on podcast on places like Apple or Spotify and you enjoy the show, please be sure to give us a 5-star rating. Charlie, Josh, and I will catch you next week, but you don't have to wait that long to get your Houston sports fix. All you have to do is subscribe to this channel, Sports Map Houston and Sports Map Texans on YouTube. We'll have more content for you during the week, including a reaction to the Texans final roster video, which will be dropping on Friday. Thanks for listening. Until next time, go Stros.